So yeah, it's different. But fundamentally, are authors still writing novels and telling great stories and finding readers to read them? Absolutely. Are these books important? Yes. Are they reflecting our culture in major, durable ways? Certainly. Are they changing the world? A little bit at a time. Yeah, they are.
It's the Liars Club Podcast, a weekly conversation filled with insights, tips, and secrets from the myriad of creative people who make stuff up for a living. Stay tuned and you can hear from New York Times bestselling authors, National Book Award finalists, debut novelists, screenwriters, musicians, composers, cartoonists, actors, stand-up comedians, line tamers, and all manner of creators who burn the midnight oil and sometimes their dinner. Whether you're a reader or a fellow writer, join us as we plumb the depths of the creative process for inspiration, semi-plausible stories, and a few laughs. So grab a libation, sit back, and spend some quality time with the creative folks who make stuff up for a living in a lively conversation with the Liars Club.
How's my sound on your end?
That's what I'm
sound
listening
great.
to
You
right
sound
now.
great.
So you sound really great, actually. So this is terrific.
You sound like a smoky scotch.
I'll put on my FM radio.
There you go. That's it, right there.
That's
There
the
you go.
voice. That's
There you
the
go.
key.
That's it. Perfect. Perfect. All right, then. Well, then, if everything's in place, it seems like we have sound and all the way around. And again, as always, that's never something we take for granted here at the Liars Club Oddcast. So here we are once again with the Liars Club Oddcast. Ladies and gentlemen, once again,
And
my name
boys
is
and girls.
And boys and girls, too. Whoever's willing to
No,
listen.
no
really,
children,
pretty
No,
much.
it's got the
please.
explicit rating. Yeah.
No,
right.
my
Ladies and gentlemen,
goodness.
take your children out of the room.
Yes.
All right. I am Keith Strunk.
Kelly Simmons.
Gregory Frost.
Mary Jones.
And I'm John McGoran, and we are very, very excited today to have on the show Donald Maass, who founded the Donald Maass Literary Agency in 1980. Today, DMLA, which employs 9 agents representing more than 150 novelists and sells more than 150 novels every year. Don is a past president of the Association of Authors Representatives, a highly sought-after speaker and workshop leader, and the author of several acclaimed books on writing, including The Career Novelist, The Emotional Craft of Fiction, Writing 21st Century Fiction, The Fire in Fiction, and the Breakout Novel books, Writing the Breakout Novel, Writing the Breakout Novel Workbook, and The Breakout Novelist. Donald Maass, welcome to the Oddcast.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, guys.
We're all like bowing down.
Oh, yeah.
Us, we're on our knees.
Well, she is. We'll send you photos.
Oh, I wish I had the video feed.
If only there was bandwidth. So I wasn't sure which question I wanted to ask first, but I narrowed it down to 2. So I'm going to ask them both and let you
At
decide.
the same
At the
time.
same time.
Yeah. So
Every other word would be the other
So
question.
you founded the Donald Maass Literary Agency in 1980. Yet you look like you were born in 1980. So I'm wondering what moisturizer you use. And the other question is that you can choose. It's either that or who is your biggest pain in the ass client?
Yeah, I'll choose the moisturizer.
Moisturizer for 100. All right, Alex.
I don't know. It's whatever my wife buys is what I use. So it's organic and natural or something like that. Pain in the ass clients. We'll just gloss over that one.
Okay. So next week, ladies and gentlemen, on the Oddcast, we will have Donald Maass's wife on talking about skin.
Talking about moisturizers.
And his clients, maybe.
That's right.
Probably she could tell
Yes,
you.
because she knows.
Yeah.
So I think this is Greg Frost. I think I first met you around 1981, 1982. And,
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I know, scary. And at that time, if I remember correctly, you were sort of more novelist than agent, and you were writing romance novels, as I recall.
Oh, wow. I'm appalled that you remember that.
But I think you were one of the
deep.
were you or were you not one of the first silhouette romance novel authors?
That is true.
Okay.
I early in my career,
Dark
when
secret.
I had like no clients and no income as an agent, I was reading manuscripts for editor friends of mine. I'd worked inside publishing houses before that, and one of them had started a new romance imprint for Simon & Schuster, which had lost the contract to distribute Harlequin books at the time. It was a line called Rendezvous Romances, and I was reading manuscripts by old Gothic romance writers from the 50s and 60s, and they just weren't getting the new style of romance. So I said to the editor one day, "I know what you're looking for. I could do that." And she said, she looked kind of askance and said, "Oh yeah, go ahead."
Try.
Yeah. So I did, and wrote a proposal. She gave me a contract back in the day when you could get a first novel contract on a proposal, which doesn't happen anymore. But in any event, so I did write this book, and they changed the name of Rendezvous Romances to Silhouette Books. So in their first line, Silhouette Desire, in their very first month of publication in 1983, Silhouette Desire, number 6, was written by yours truly.
Ooh,
Wow.
excellent.
Under your real name, not a pen name.
Of course not. No.
I'm just wondering.
No. In fact, that is one of the barriers that has still not been broken in the romance field.
Oh,
There are
really?
men who write romance novels and category romance novels. Not many, but there are some. But consumers still, are resistant to that. So it's still pseudonym time for male authors in that field.
Excellent.
Dark secret right off the bat. Love it.
That's pretty awesome. So 5 years out of college, you say, "Oh, okay, sure, yeah, I'll start my own literary agency." How did that come about? What led to that decision, and what took you so goddamn long? Were you just like dicking around?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, good.
No, I had worked in publishing itself in house, as we say. Before that, I was a very junior editor at Dell Publishing. Around the time it was becoming part of what is now Random House. But I was downsized in a recession, and jobs weren't really that plentiful. So I found a job at a literary agency. A bad old agency that a number of agents had worked at one time or another. Russell Galen, Henry Morrison, Richard Curtis, Henry Denau, whole bunch had worked there at one time or another. In fact, Russ Galen's office was right next to mine. And after I don't know, about 6 months or so, I just took a look at what we were doing and thought to myself, this is not rocket science. I mean, I know how to do this.
It's practically romance fiction.
But
I don't know which was easier, but in any event, I hung out my own shingle, and I did make one great big mistake in starting out on my own, though. I just neglected to realize that you actually needed clients, authors to represent and work, and that took a while.
If you build it, they will walk down Fifth Avenue.
Over time, that happened, and after a while, I was making a living at it, and I could quit my day job writing fiction and focus on being a literary agent.
Okay, that's strange.
I think that's a first for the podcast.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. My day job was writing.
So do you like being an agent better than you liked writing?
They're different.
Yeah.
And yes, I still write. I mean, I've written a bunch of books on the craft of fiction, as you've seen.
Right.
And I continue to write fiction under other names.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, in scraps of time that I get on airplanes and airports and whatnot. But it's a different. It scratches a different itch. It satisfies in a different way. Being an agent is, it is many things. It's running a business and having that business hat. It's being a contract negotiator, sometimes a contract writer. So there's a legal hat, kind of paranoid legal hat that you wear. Then there's the business of actually working with authors, doing the editorial development with them before we go out on submission. There's submission, there's auctions, there's negotiating, which is, very high energy and a lot of fun.
How about the shrink role, when you have to be the shrink for the author?
Oh, gosh, yeah, there's that too. I didn't major in psychology in college, but that's okay. I wound up being kind of a therapist anyway. In fact, just yesterday, I had 2 back-to-back calls with very successful authors.
And who were they?
I won't say, but each was freaking out in a different way. One had just come off a bad editorial experience with their publisher, which was unusual, and the other had just read the pilot script for a TV show based on one of her books and was unhappy with the script.
Are either of them your biggest pain in the ass client?
No. No. No, my biggest pain in the ass clients of all time have all subsequently died. So
you accept no responsibility, right?
This didn't involve eating mushrooms
like
or
that
something.
It's just coincidental.
Nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it.
So, in your fiction, do you represent yourself?
I have in the past. I don't know if that will always be true. It's good to jump.
You might fire yourself.
No, not an LA agent.
I package myself and then I unpackage myself.
That was an in joke.
There's lots to unpack in that.
Yeah.
That was
In any event, it's good to jump through hoops as a writer. To put work out anonymously, to get feedback on it, just the way anybody does, is you've got to go through the same refining process. You've got to go and jump over the same high bars. I've read published novels by agents and editors. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good. And that's partly because they, really just haven't had to do everything that authors, in Sheboygan or wherever, have to do to, clear all the hurdles and finally get into print.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question. You have been an agent for about even as long as I've been writing. And in my experience, the role of the agent has really changed.
Yes.
And I wonder what's been the biggest challenge to you, or what you've seen as a trend over that time.
In terms of how the agency business is.
Yeah.
Well, what's changed is the number of ways in which books can be delivered to consumers, and the rise of different kinds of media, new media, and what that means, and how we manage all of that. Not only just in North America, but around the globe. For instance, I was at the London Book Fair a month or two ago, and as you guys may know, audio has been a really big story in publishing over the last year.
Yes.
The rise of audio sales has been really remarkable and very good from our perspective. But that's happening in other languages and other territories too. So you have to think a little more strategically as an agent about how you're rolling out a client's career. Do you separate audio rights? Do you go with audio original offers when you get them? If so, when and how, and for which clients? That's happening in German as well, in France, in Brazil. There are many, many formats for books and many territories in which to think about. Developing a really successful fiction career. When you move beyond the debut stage, when you move into deeper phases of a career, it's really an international business. Yeah. And an audience is built in around the globe in many languages and many formats. Hardcover, paperback, ebook, audio, and then there are even more exotic formats. Plus, there's the whole media, movies and TV component to it, and how does that fold in? There's a lot to do, a lot of different kinds of contracts, a lot of considerations, a lot of strategy to think about as an author's career develops. So, yeah, it's become a more complex business. The contract issues have become, thornier and way more interesting and more challenging. Back in the day, of the great midlist and original paperback days, which are kind of the days of yore now, we used to sort of rubber stamp contracts sometimes. That doesn't really happen anymore. So you got to think on your feet a lot more. You got to be fluid in ways that you didn't necessarily have to be before. It's become more challenging, but also more exciting and more interesting. It's actually more fun.
Huh.
I want to ask you a question about all of your writing books. And, wherever you go to writing conferences, and all of us teach at writing conferences, you go, and there are people toting your books around, and they're always on the table, and they are worshiping at the altar of you, which is totally
really?
worth absolutely. Oh, yes. And, your columns in Writer Unboxed, I'm always sending to people because they're filled with wisdom.
Yeah.
And I just want to know, why do you keep encouraging people? Aren't there enough writers done? come on. I mean, don't you ever feel like giving up and stopping all this encouragement?
Next one and close the door behind you.
Okay.
But seriously, are you seeing a lot of talent, and are you feeling satisfied with all of this encouragement? Do you feel your efforts coming to something, or
Seeing an impact, you mean?
are you cynical about the future of debut authors, or are you hopeful, I guess, is what I'm
Oh
asking.
my gosh, I am not cynical at all. Almost
Well,
the
we're out of
opposite.
time for
Yeah, right.
Well, we're screwed. Okay,
I guess
we're
I'm
done.
a little cynical, but no, you are hopeful. That's good to hear.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a couple of facts. I mean, just hard facts that you can take a look at. The fact is that the publishing industry is not struggling. It's not dying. It hasn't been mortally wounded by the rise of ebooks and self-publishing. It's healthy. It's growing. I mean, not in leaps and bounds the way some certain tech sectors are, but it's a steadily growing business. It has changed in composition, and we can talk about that if you're interested. But basically, we're chugging along and doing great. The number of fiction titles published every year, which is about, if we're talking about print books, is about 6,000, and that's been consistent for my entire 40-whatever-year career in the industry. And are authors still making it? Are authors still finding audiences? Are authors still writing great books? Are authors still becoming bestsellers? Yes, all of that is true. Some things have changed. The mixture of formats that we use and that work has shifted. It is increasingly a hardcover business, and the world of original paperbacks, which was so great, from the early 50s on in through the 70s and 80s and 90s, that's really diminished. Mass market paperbacks and their presence in the retail world has declined drastically. In some Barnes & Noble locations, mass market paperbacks are just confined to a spinner rack somewhere in the store. Right. And so, and that's had implications for price points, and ultimately it's had implications for how fiction is written, too. It was really one of the ancillary points in a book of mine called Writing 21st Century Fiction, which is really about what's happening, how literature itself is evolving and what that means for fiction writers as we go forward in this century. So, yeah, it's different. But fundamentally, are authors still writing novels and telling great stories and finding readers to read them? Absolutely. Are these books important? Yes. Are they reflecting our culture in major, in durable ways? Certainly. Are they changing the world? A little bit at a time. Yeah, they are. So, yeah, I am hopeful.
Good. That's great.
So,
what a lovely answer.
Yeah, it's a beautiful answer.
Really.
We'll be right back after this. Imagine a genre-friendly creative writing program with top instructors and no residency requirement. Imagine you can earn an MFA from a fully accredited university while attending classes online, and that you could choose to focus in fiction, creative nonfiction, screenwriting, or poetry. You couldn't imagine or create a better writing program for busy adults than the National University MFA program. Since 2005, the National University Online MFA program has helped thousands of working adults transform the ideas in their heads onto the page and out into the world. Explore more at www.nu.edu. That's www.nu.edu.
So I know your agency handles a lot of genre fiction authors, and I know also that you've mentioned in interviews how much market share science fiction has lost in the past couple of decades. So if someone was to approach your agency wanting to write science fiction, what would you tell them they need to do? Actually,
I may have felt that. I might have said that in the past. Don't actually remember saying that, but I'll take your word for it. The fact is, though, that science fiction and fantasy has been very strong in recent years, and media, movies and TV, have been a big part of that. 20 years ago, you couldn't sell science fiction in Hollywood. There was like one outlet for it, the Sci-Fi Channel. and that was it. Today, wow, what a difference!
It's everywhere.
It's Netflix's lifeblood. Yes, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and and so much of it based on fiction. Mm-hmm. We're all binging things on Netflix and Amazon, wherever.
Amazon, The Expanse, absolutely.
And wait till the really big money really starts to roll through that industry, and I'm talking about Google scale money and Amazon scale money.
Right.
That's huge.
Apple TV too, right?
Oh yeah. Look, this is this year marks the high watermark of TV production. There are 487 new series being produced this year.
Wow.
Something like that. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And a lot of it is science fiction and fantasy. Mm-hmm. Now, in the realm of fiction, in terms of print, it's a little different. Science fiction is still viable. There is still an audience for it. It's the type of science fiction that finds that audience is a little different than it was in the golden age.
Right.
But
what is that type?
Well, this sort of dovetails with something we were discussing a little while ago, the rise of hardcover fiction. What's that? The implications that's had for how fiction is written. The thing about hardcover books is that they're priced at $25. And that's a lot different than a mass market paperback back in the original paperback days when books were like $2.99, $3.99, $4.99, and even up to $5.99. But now, mass market paperbacks at $7.99, $8.99, they're not value purchases anymore.
Right.
You can get a trade paperback, a discount sometimes for not much more. And hardcover too, which the chains support, it's a high value item. Well, what consumers want out of that $25 book is not a pulpy adventure story such as we might have found in paperback 25, 30, 35 years ago. What the consumers are responding to and paying money for, and we see this reflected in sales and royalty statements, is a more novelistic experience. A story that's not just speculative, that's not just a really cool idea, a projection of something that's different into the future, but something that tells the story of people, of human beings in a profound and engaging way. It's the things that make literature, novels themselves, just rich and engrossing and deep is what people respond to in science fiction and fantasy as well. And at the same time, that's also reflecting something about the way in which who writes this fiction.
Right.
Once upon a time, science fiction and fantasy authors, well, we know them. They were like us, the kids in the AV club in high school.
Guilty as charged. Yes.
You recognize this, right? They were they're the NASA scientists, the engineers,
right.
the tech guys, and eventually women, thank goodness. And it was a club. It was a very, very distinct group of readers and a very distinct group of writers. Today, science fiction and fantasy, those writers can come from any kind of background. There are people in MFA programs at universities around the country who are writing science fiction and fantasy, or to put it more precisely, they're writing fiction that borrows ideas, that borrows frameworks, story frameworks, and concepts from science fiction and fantasy. Science fiction and fantasy has become an influence rather than a segregated category. So there's all of this has contributed to a literature that, to my way of thinking and my reading, is much richer, much deeper, much more human, much more moving and engaging and involving. It's not just, a mind trip anymore.
Yeah.
And any insights into the
welcome to the slipstream? Yeah.
The Ian McEwan.
I was just going to say.
Right. Debacle and the salon gutting of Ian McEwan.
There's a great example, a highly literary writer who did borrow a science fictional premise, at least in one of his books. I haven't read his most recent, which seems it might be similar. But in any event, you're talking about books like Station 11, like The Martian, like The Bear and the Nightingale. These are novels. They're not just science fiction fantasy. These are novels. Right. And that's one of the things I teach. It's what that means for genre fiction writers is one of my interests. It's one of the things I'm putting out there. And one of the things that I've just seen as successful out there in the marketplace.
So, quick question in terms of, I'm listening to you talk about and I very much love and support and buoyed up by the enthusiasm and the optimism that you have. When you talk to writers now who want to become novelists, who want to get into the business, like so many of our listeners are, what would you say to them in terms of how you fashion yourself, what you focus on, to have a long career in this business? So much is focused on, as you point out, so much is focused on getting that first book written. But really, it's about the long term. What are the qualities that they really need to develop to have a long-term career as an author?
What an outstanding question. You are correct. It is a long-term. Nonfiction is a little different. Fiction happens typically over a number of titles. That kind of career just develops over time. Years ago, I developed a phrase to kind of explain it to people, the 5-book threshold. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that it takes 5 books, in most cases, for general book readers, book consumers out there to even become aware of an author.
Right.
After 5 books, and it's different for everybody, but after 5 books or so, roughly, you have that effect where people say, "Oh, yeah, the latest John McGorn. Yeah, that's really good."
We saw the last John McGorn. It was scary.
Yeah, right. And people talk about you, like they've read you, even when they haven't. I mean, that's
a good thing.
Thank you for using John as the example.
We talk about him like that all the time.
It just goes to show that there's a certain awareness of an author accrues over time in titles. But what does that mean for the writing? What does that mean? It means that you need to develop a skill set. I think there are 2 basic ways to go about writing fiction. One is to outline ahead of time. The other way is to pants your way through it. That is to write organically and intuitively in successive drafts. And neither one is wrong. They both produce different but really good results. But if you don't have a grounding in some kind of craft, in some sort of understanding of your process, of why your fiction works, and what it is that's working about it, you can't reproduce a great novel again and again and again. You have to have a grounding. We've seen it, I'm sure you've all seen it, as I have noticed. There's this sparkling debut novel, and it just knocks you out. And book 2 is a big letdown. Mm-hmm. Sophomore slump, they call it. And,
right.
And what's happening in those cases is the author, worked for years and years and years and years on that first book, and did produce something great, and many, many eyes were on it, and many voices contributed to shaping the story, and all of that's great. The second book, that range of voices narrows down, the time available to write it shortens,
right.
And the lack of craft shows.
Right.
So understanding things about character construction, character development, about the 3 levels of tension in a story, about what scene structure really is, about immersive point of view, which is the step beyond close third-person point of view. You guys probably know what I'm talking about. To at least have some understanding of those things, it gives you a foundation of craft so that when you tackle the next project, and every book is different, and every book has challenges, every book gets written in a different way, even in series. And you're better off, though, if you have some kind of understanding, if not of the craft, at least of your process, some trust and faith in that is going to take you there. So this idea that writing fiction is magic, that there is something called native genius, which is either switched on or switched off, depending on how much you're drinking.
Wait, that's what's happening here.
It's later out there on the East Coast.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I think that's unhelpful.
Yeah.
It's a craft, and you can learn that craft. In fact, one of the things that I like to do is to figure out parts of the craft that don't have explanations, that aren't well understood, and find out ways to explain them and turn them into tools. Like, for instance, the sense of wonder when we're talking about science fiction and fantasy, this is primary. The sense of wonder that the story evokes. Well, that's nice to say, and we love to say it about books that we've read. But what produces that unique sense of wonder as opposed to excitement or anything else like we might find in a thriller? Well, I broke it down and studied it and found out that, the sense of wonder really is a subset of the feeling of awe. And awe comes about for certain reasons. And when you understand what they are, you can you can build in an experience of awe and wonder into your story deliberately. Mm-hmm. And if you'd like to know how that's done, the secret of that, well, you can read my next book.
Oh, that'll keep us on tenterhooks for some time.
It's actually fairly simple when you think about it. So, are you interested?
Yes, go.
Do go on.
Well, wonder comes about when what seems impossible really comes about. That's wonderful. So, if you look at your story, start at the end of the story and say, okay, what's going to be the happy outcome at the end of the story? Is there going to be a great forgiveness? Is there going to be an action that's grand and heroic on the part of a character? Well, okay, fine. Work backwards through the story then and set it up and reinforce that what is going to be done later on is impossible. Cannot happen. And you can set that up step by step through the story so that when it actually happens at the end, it's like, oh, whoa.
Yeah.
I never thought that could happen. And you can even twist it further by making the reward for that or the outcome of that even better than expected, even more than is deserved. An extra gift, the lagniappe that they say down in New Orleans.
Yes.
And that heightens the sense of wonder at the end of the story. If you think about it, it's a pretty simple psychological transaction or trick, if you will, that you can deliberately work in a story if you want to.
Yeah, that's great.
Wow. I was going to say, that sounds not dissimilar to writing advice that Kate Wilhelm gave to Clarion students many years ago. I was one of them, which was when you think you have the ending of your story, stop and write 3 more. Because the first ending you come to will inevitably be the ending that your reader will jump to ahead of the story. They'll arrive at it, and the story will be dissatisfying. If you write 2 more after that, you will eventually come to the one which is the equivalent, basically, of what you're saying as the awe ending, the magical ending, the surprise ending, because that's the one nobody will get to right away. That's the one that's harder to achieve and to pull off, and will have the greater effect on the reader.
Damon and Kate, gosh, miss them. But seriously. But that's true throughout a story too, though. Often, a first draft is often the safe draft. Mm-hmm. It's the expected draft. It's the draft you write when you're doing what you think you should be doing to satisfy the market, your readers, your editor. Playing it safe is not a good thing to do in storytelling. And it doesn't lead to great success either. Safe storytelling is where the mid-list is, Great storytelling is risk-taking. Yeah. And as we, look for writers to represent at my company, we're looking for people who are doing something not quite like what anybody else is doing. They're pushing the envelope in some way. Because those are the ones that are going to be successful. Indeed, down the road, they may be the ones with imitators.
So here's a question related to that. It seems like everyone's looking for that new idea, that next big idea. And there have been trends, or from the reader's point of view, it seems like there's trends where a slew of books comes out on zombies, or a slew of books on superheroes.
Unreliable narrators.
Unreliable narrators, exactly.
Templar.
They're all on a blank.
So I found out that there is a company, an organization where designers get together and 2 years in advance, they pick the colors that all furniture, all clothing, everything's going to be in 2 years. So tell us the truth. Do agents do this too? Do you get together and
fucking with us?
What's the next
big idea that's going to come? And then coincidentally, that's all the novels that come out.
Well, what you're describing is what we used to call the bandwagon syndrome, which is, everybody jumps on what was successful last year. So
right.
if you're reading a dark thriller with an unreliable narrator and a big twist in the middle, and it has "girl" in the title, then you're reading a novel that's on the back of the bandwagon.
Well, yeah, that's like the Da Vinci Code phenomenon.
Your question, though,
right.
is do agents know about the trends, and do agents, capitalize on the trends?
Or do they decide the trends?
Decide the trends even more.
The cartel.
Oh,
of
wouldn't
agents.
that be nice? Oh man, I'd be driving a Maserati, baby.
Write me one of these.
What are you driving?
Oh, dude.
Well, that's over.
Prius, please.
Yeah, Prius,
I'm in
okay.
publishing. Anyway,
Prius.
but about trends, because we watch deals pretty closely, and that deals happen like a year to 2 years before a book actually comes out.
Right.
Then maybe we are paying a little more attention than the average author to what's actually selling, and we might notice trends as they're developing. We certainly can't create them. There's something in the zeitgeist, but more often it's a successful book. Oh, I don't know. Let's say something like The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? I mean, you have a mega hit like that. Are people going to write dystopian fiction, YA dystopian fiction after that? Oh, yeah.
To death.
Maybe.
And is it easy to sell for a while? Oh, yeah. Do agents pick it up because you can sell it for a little while? Oh, yeah.
Sure.
And then what happens a couple of years down the road is you start to hear from editors over lunch or whatever in an email, no more YA dystopian, please.
Right.
We've heard that about dystopian. We've heard that about vampires. We've heard that about cyberpunk. We've heard that about all kinds of things. Chick lit went down in flames.
I keep thinking this is the Da Vinci Code phenomenon, where everybody who had a dead Knights Templar novel in their drawer dusted that sucker off and immediately sold it, and the 2 hours after the Da Vinci Code became a #1 hit.
And that does happen for a brief period of time.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And each of those categories gets overpublished. So what do you do about that? Avoid the trends. Yeah. Avoid the trends. That is not the path to success. The path to success is writing your own fiction, the unique stories that only you can tell, the things that only you have to say that are urgent and universal. I mean, those are lofty things to say, and they mean something a little different when you're actually sitting down at the keyboard.
Sure.
But truly, being your own writer, telling your own kind of story in your own voice, in your own way, that's the only way to really establish a durable, and I mean decades long, many, many, many titles long career.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to just kind of getting back to the nuts and bolts of the agenting. I wanted to ask you a couple questions in that regard, and one of them is that I think that there's a dilemma among writers looking for agents that they often confront the kind of new/old broom dilemma, or the big/little/fish/pond dilemma. Is it better to pursue an industry icon who has all the contacts in the clout, but might be more attuned to and enthusiastic about managing the careers of established bestsellers, as opposed to breaking in new talent? Or do you think it's better to find a young, hungry, savvy, industry icon in the making?
That's a really good question, and it's a strategic one. The idea that once upon a time that the name agents, the New York agents, had the contacts and the entree. That's not quite as true as it once was. The information about who the editors are, where they are, what they're buying is pretty much accessible to everybody today. So everybody knows who the players are. Everybody knows what they're looking for. It's, if you do the legwork, it's not that hard to figure out. So the playing field is kind of level, whether you're a long-time agent like myself or somebody who's just starting up. Does it help to open doors to have a name and a reputation? Well, maybe a little, but, frankly, publishers are looking for good work to publish, and sometimes that work can come from an agent who started up last year. So, they can't really afford to dismiss people just because of their name recognition. So from that point of view, a younger agent, a less established agent, can potentially, be just as good for you as, somebody who's been around the business a little while, like me.
Right.
However, that said, I do think there's a difference, and it's not just in terms of experience, in terms of how to handle situations, negotiating and contracts and whatnot. I've got a lot of experience with that. Some people have a little less, and that's there's a learning curve, and that's not a bad thing. I wouldn't never say that a newer agent is automatically going to do a worse job negotiating a deal than I would. I don't know, maybe, but probably not. The bigger factor, though, and the factor that really makes the difference, I think, for people is whether any given agent, new or old, connects with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Do they understand your kind of fiction? Do they get your vision? Do they speak the editorial language that is meaningful to you, that not just strokes your ego, but leads you to write even better fiction than you're writing? Do they have a strategy for unfolding your fiction and your career that makes sense? Or are they just going to throw spaghetti at the wall?
Right.
Asking the right questions, listening to how you're spoken to, listening to how deep is the understanding of your fiction on any given agent's part, and then seeing just how specific and how thoughtful a rollout plan is. It's easy to say we're going out on sub with this, and here's who we're going to go to, and just put up a laundry list of all the biggest editors in the field. I mean, that's easy. Anybody can do that. Mm-hmm. But why these three imprints first? Why these three editors specifically? And are we looking in London at the same time that we're looking in New York, which is something agents really should be thinking about these days? When and how do we roll out foreign rights if we keep them? German rights and Japanese translation rights, and now China and Korea and everywhere else in the world. Yes. We're selling rights in places regularly now, in places I just never imagined would be like that. And it's great. But so how does all that fit together, and when's the right time? What happens when you get the trifecta, the 3-starred reviews from P.W. Kirkus and Library Journal, as we do quite often at my agency, and Hollywood starts to call? Is it the right time? How do you go about it? What do you do? What do agents have to say about those things? Can they answer all those questions and bring some smarts and maybe, in some cases, hopefully some wisdom to those decisions? Those are the things you're looking for. It's not about new or old. It's not about New York or anywhere else. It's about, does this author really, 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 truly connect with you, understand you, your fiction, and how your career is going to unfold? And does this agent have great ideas about how to do that?
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask one last question. Because you've been so involved in the industry for decades now. I'm just wondering, how have the strengths and weaknesses of the submissions that you receive changed over the years?
Has the slush pile gotten better?
Yes. Good question.
Or different,
or more frightening.
Well, I think no. The composition of the slush pile hasn't changed really. I mean, it's still 99.95% of what is submitted to us we're not going to be able to represent. Mm-hmm. What has changed is the way in which things come to us. There's the plain old submission process. It's now by email, rather than the old days of the self-addressed stamped envelope, and the posted query letter and all of that. That's gone. Those are the old days. It's all by email now, but there are also other ways to contact ineffective ways are using like Google Messenger or whatever. I really don't like it when people do that. But pitch slams and the number of writers' conferences that you can attend where you can meet agents and editors is up dramatically over the last 40 years.
Yeah, the speed dating approach,
Yeah, which has its ups and downs, but the fact is there are other more ways than just the blunt sort of intimidating, depressing, sometimes blind submission process to catch the attention of agents and editors. So there are more avenues today, and greater opportunities for networking as well. It used to be so hard to get to know a published author in the field. Today, it's as easy as Twitter. So I think it's a really great time to be submitting. I do wish that what was submitted was a little more seasoned, shall we say.
Well, you don't get manuscripts with ketchup on them anymore because it's electronic.
That's a watermark, a PDF watermark.
PDF watermark.
So what would be your one piece of advice to a starting writer looking for an agent?
Oh, I mean, the one piece of advice is the same as it's always been, and it's not going to sound very helpful, which is write great fiction.
Right. But assuming you suck.
Assuming you've done that. Just make sure, do your best to get your actual pages in front of somebody who's looking.
Right.
At my agency, pretty much everybody asks to see the first 5 pages of a manuscript in a query. If you're sending a query email, paste the first 5 pages at the bottom of your email. When my email queries are screened, I have to say there's an awful lot of them. But when I do look at them, I scroll down, I see what the author has to say about what they've written. I'll be honest with you guys, I skip that. I scroll down to the first page and I start reading. That's what's meaningful to me.
Right.
That's what I've got to sell. And I'm looking for that unique voice. I'm looking for that genuine storytelling.
Totally hear you.
Yeah, and you know immediately as you start to read. I mean, younger agents and interns who work at my company sometimes, they'll plow through 25, 30, 40 pages before they shrug and say, well, no, not this one. The voice of a storyteller for me is there immediately.
Yes, right.
So you mentioned Writer on Box earlier. I do blog monthly on the craft of fiction. Just yesterday I had a post up, writeronbox.com, about the first 5 lines.
Yes.
And how the narrative voice seduces us into the dream state that we're in when we read a story. And that happens, and I'm more and more convinced of this, that happens immediately. And I mean, not within the first 5 pages, but within the first 5 lines.
Right.
Or it doesn't happen at all.
Right.
Yes, right.
Right.
And what it is in those 5 lines that accomplishes that effect, there are 2 things, and they're there when it works. And you can identify those 2 things, and you can write an opening like that, and you can put readers in the dream state immediately.
We're gonna jump off to 2 Lies and a Truth in a second here, but I did want to offer up a compliment in terms of your younger, newer agents, if you will. Caitlin McDonald was with us at the Philadelphia Writers Conference this past year.
Terrific.
She was lovely.
Yeah,
she was really wonderful.
great.
Wonderful
Great.
person.
Really
She's a fabulous agent.
Yeah.
And I'm
She was
very
really
lucky
great.
to have her.
And before we do that, I also want to say I have used exercises that are in your Writing the Breakout Novel workbook for my own writing classes, and they're fabulous. It's a really good book. I can't stress how useful that workbook is for.
That's great to
somebody
hear.
starting
Thank you.
out. Sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to?
Yeah,
Put a spawn over Don.
Well, I love you more than either of those.
Well, there you have it.
I was already on my knees, so I don't know what else I can do.
We will be honest, Don.
We tried.
The tattoo he has of you on his back, it's stunning. It really is.
The Roger Stone of the literary set here.
That's right. All right. So, well, that was awesome. That was great, and it was sublime, I would say. So now is time for ridiculous.
From the numinous to the absurd.
We have time for one last question, and that is the Two Lies and a Truth segment. Mary, please stop jingling your necklace.
Oh, I forgot. I do that every time. I made it through almost the whole session without
jingling it four times.
And then I had to ruin it.
So there you go. Lay it on us. Lay it on us. Truths, lies.
Okay, here are 3 things about me. All right. First, I share a birthday, and I mean the day, the month, and the year, with the president of the country of Sierra Leone. Second, I was once punched in the stomach by Harlan Ellison.
I'm going with that.
I am too. You can stop right there. I knew Harlan.
And you deserved it.
That's what happened.
But just in case, let's hear number 3.
All right, do you want the third one?
Yes.
Third fact. I once, in an elevator in the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan, vomited on the shoes of Isaac Asimov.
Was this right after being punched in the stomach by Harlan Ellison?
Yes, that's how he got down that low.
Yeah.
So
different years.
Yes,
different
years.
So these are 2 lies and a truth. Yes.
I feel like this is one of those times where we pick the Harlan Ellison. He was like, "Oh no, it was Brad Thorne that punched me in the stomach."
No.
And I think
I'm going to go with number 1.
I think
It's
he
number 1.
grew up on the president of Sierra Leone.
Right. Or maybe he's got the same birthday as the president of Cote d'Ivoire.
Yeah, it's one of those.
I'm going with
You have the same birthday as Isaac Asimov.
going with
No,
president.
wait, what?
I'm going Harlan Ellison.
I am
that's
too.
just the
I'm
fact.
going Harlan Ellison.
I'm zagging.
I'm not going with Harlan Ellison because just like we had someone a while ago
I
that gave us
know.
perfect.
It sounds too good to be true.
Too good to be true.
Yes,
it's
right.
too right. So
But
based
if
on
we
that,
all vote on it, maybe it will become true.
I'm going to go with throwing up on Isaac
He's dead,
Asimov.
guys.
Are you trying to become the Attorney General of the United States? I'm just
Yes.
No, so I'm thinking.
No, you're not.
Oh, never mind.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking that if you threw up on Isaac
Asimov's shoes.
No, it's just
On his shoes. Just on his shoes.
Yeah, see, it's the details that get you. So I'm thinking.
That's actually how loafers got their name.
The
It's
president.
onomatopoeia.
So you're thinking
I'm
what he
thinking the
threw up on
president,
Isaac Asimov's shirt?
Mary and I
or-
are presidenting.
Yeah.
So let's not overthink.
Alright, so
I think that
let's-
ship has sailed.
let's
But
get
Mary,
this
what's
right.
your guess?
I just said,
President.
would you pay
Okay.
attention? The president.
So Sierra Leone.
Two
Yes.
folks, 2 people that say it's the president of Sierra Leone.
Two Harlan Ellisons.
Two Harlan
Harlan
Ellisons.
Ellisons, and I'm going with Isaac Asimov. So there you go.
All right.
All right.
Lay it on us.
All right, so that's pretty even split there.
Yep.
So I
Yeah.
guess my lies were pretty good.
Very
Yeah,
good.
they were
Good
good.
lies,
Never
yeah.
stayed.
Excellent.
Well,
Thank
I mean, you are an agent, you know.
Getting punched in the stomach, not such a stretch, huh?
No.
Of course, we all knew Harlan Ellison, so there's a certain credibility to that story.
Yes, there is. Yes, right.
And the truth is that while I was nearly punched in the stomach by Harlan Ellison, I have not actually been punched in the stomach.
Okay,
by
fair
Harlan
enough.
Ellison. So that was a lie. Sorry.
That's good. That's good.
It's all details.
A lot has happened in elevators at the Roosevelt Hotel. It used to be a big venue for awards dinners and
Yes,
stuff like that.
it did. Yes.
And riding an elevator with Isaac Asimov could well have happened. However, I never did ride in an elevator with Isaac Asimov. I did meet him, but never did ride in an elevator with it, let alone vomit on him.
And you're the wrong sex to have been pinched in the ass
Really,
by him.
seriously, I would have turned the other way.
Yes, right.
Turn the other shoe.
No,
And
no,
then
I
you would
do-
have thrown up on Harlan Ellison's
I know,
shoes.
yeah.
So Mary and Kelly
No,
were
I do
right.
share a birthday with the president of the country of Sierra Leone. His name is
All right.
Ernest.
Go, Mary. Go,
Fine.
Kelly.
Blood diamond, baby.
well
Blood
done.
diamond.
I have to
Blood
ask-
diamond John.
I have to ask, did he point that out in a query letter?
We turned him down.
El Chapo, also
Derivative.
not a client.
I'm sorry, somebody else has already claimed that
I
birthday.
mean, Just to bring this full circle, that they were well-crafted lies.
Yes,
so you know.
they were indeed.
Oh,
Like the topic of your next writing book.
They made
Crafting the breakout lie.
They made us feel wonder.
It's true. We did. Yeah.
We wondered.
And I wonder what she's lying about.
I wonder what she's lying about too. Yes.
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been fabulous. I'm so glad to have been able to chat with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for
John.
a lot of good stuff.
Thanks, John.
If you enjoy the Liars Club podcast and the other fine shows on Project Entertainment Network, check out the cool stuff for sale at the Project Entertainment Network store or consider supporting Project Entertainment Network on Patreon.com. And as always, many thanks for your continued support.
Armcast, Dead Sexy Podcasts. I'm your host, Armand Rosamilia. Fridays exclusively on Project Entertainment Network, where I interview authors, publishers, editors, artists, filmmakers, narrators, the lady from Walmart, whoever I feel like talking to. That's every Friday, Armcast, right here on Project Entertainment Network.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.